The Villa Pratolino was constructed in the late 16th century under the patronage of Francesco I de' Medici, and in a short time was renowned for the sumptuousness of the sensory experiences of its built environment. The central element was water, and sophisticated hydraulic engineering was built into its landscape and architecture. For centuries, until its demolition in the 19th century, its memory as a masterpiece of Renaissance innovation and ambition endured, even as its complex mechanical grottos and fountains corroded into stillness. Located a short distance north of Florence, the suburban villa and sprawling parks on its north-south axis were a collaboration between Francesco I and a vast team of architects, engineers, and artists. Chief among them was Bernardo Buontalenti, a talented Florentine polymath who was a lifelong companion of the Prince and later Grand Duke of Florence. Pratolino was built as a showcase of art, science, and control on the grandest scale. Its famous marvels were predicated upon ingenious water engineering, a bold feat on naturally arid Tuscan farmland. Once owned by the Orlandini and later a Medici works superintendent, the land was barren until its 1568 acquisition, which sparked its transformation into a Medici wonderland. The ability to command and multiply such a scarce resource underscored the Medicean absolutist ideology, elevating the later Grand Duke Francesco I as ruler and demiurge, capable of submitting nature itself to his artistic and intellectual pursuits. Elaborate hydraulic systems were constructed to redirect water from surrounding hills and channel it in unprecedented volumes through a series of fountains, basins, artificial grottos, and intricate automata that articulated a message of total dominance over nature itself. The 18th century map, published by Bernardo Sansones Grilli, charted the major systems of the villa and parks. Water at Pratolino was therefore not passive, but highly performative and surprisingly sensorial. Visitors encountered jets that soaked them unexpectedly, in a calculated interplay of surprise and delight that evoked Renaissance ideals of wonder, or meraviglia, as a gateway to deeper contemplation. Water's sensory impact extended beyond surprise as the sound of cascading water amplified through echo chambers and grottos, creating a sonic landscape that heightened the emotional resonance of the space. The tactile coolness of mist in the air and the visual spectacle of animated fountains engaged multiple senses simultaneously. These experiences, described in Francesco de Vieri's Delle meravigliose opere di Pratolino, elevated water from a functional element to a dynamic medium that engaged visitors physically and emotionally. However, the manipulation of water at Pratolino extended beyond the physical plane and into metaphysical realms, also of great interest to its Medici patron and the magical worldview of the Renaissance more generally. The fluid mechanics powering its mobile automata, themselves in the forms of gods, goddesses, nymphs, and fantastic beasts, drew on ancient philosophies concerning animated cult statues, as described in texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, from which the astral mechanisms of Marsilio Ficino's philosophy took their explanations. Extant or underway by 1578, the Pratolino automata were assembled on the threshold between the magical worldview of the Renaissance and the mechanistic one of the modern era. As recently argued by Verardi, Giambattista della Porta's 1558 Magia Naturalis ferried the Renaissance's catalogue of magical objects, long a part of the common heritage of European ideas, into the era of 17th century experimental philosophy. Long-established tropes of wonder, like talking heads or animated, living statues, were subject to new verifications in this new age. The 17th century English polymath John Evelyn had the opportunity to view Pratolino's automata, less than 2 centuries prior to their destruction, as well as the contemporary works of quote-unquote mathematical magic, namely mechanical automata, constructed by John Wilkins and published under a work of the same name. In his diary, Evelyn leaves testament of the tableau of choreographed automata at Pratolino as they appeared at the time of his visit in 1645. Only one work that Evelyn described, the quote, giant representing the Apennines, remains within the publicly accessible Parco Mediceo di Pratolino today. The Medicean Colossus, the first of its kind since antiquity, was completed by Giambologna around 1580 and featured interior grottos over 2 floors that housed fountains and water-driven automata, all now lost. Their documented forms, however, iterate an early modern understanding of mineralogy from a distinctly Medicean perspective of natural philosophy as well as industry. The medieval idea of gems and metals as the products of the earth's digestive processes was still sufficiently alchemically au courant to be deployed in a poem by Agnolo Bronzino, a renowned painter for Cosimo I and also briefly for Francesco I, that recounted a dreamlike journey through giants' entrails in his Il piatto del Bronzino Pittore. At Pratolino, the visitor could physically enter a giant's entrails that revealed cavern after cavern of wonders. Imagery in these grottos celebrated the Medici's extensive control of specific mines and resources, with Livorno and Elba personified in 2 lost pendant frescoes by Jacopo Ligozzi. A vase crafted from cut hardstone, jasper in this case, itself a much vaunted Medicean reconquest of a lost technology of antiquity, doubled as a fountain with water gushing from, quote, 1,000 places from coral sourced from the Red Sea. A uniquely marine element pervaded the Apennines' interior spaces throughout, evoking the sea caves of Medici island mining endeavors in a fantastically opulent setting of coral, shells, spongestone, stalactites, and mother-of-pearl. Its ground floor space contained the Grotto of Thetis, with a lost sculpture of its namesake shape-shifting naiad atop a virtuoso fountain, both crafted by Giambologna. The original late 16th century appearance of this grotto, effectively hydraulic sculpture within a colossal hydraulic sculpture, can be reconstructed from a sketched view at the beginning of the 17th century by Giovanni Guerra, today conserved in the Albertina Museum of Vienna. Also a gilded terracotta model of Thetis by Giambologna, and a drawing by Heinrich Schickhardt, the renowned German architect, engineer, and cartographer who visited the Villa Pratolino during his journey to Italy in 1599 to 1600. An educated familiarity with classical texts, which would have been the name of the game for the Grand Duke's elite visitors to this extraordinary space, would have revealed further links between Thetis, automata, and the figures Evelyn describes. In the Iliad, Thetis journeys to Hephaestus, Vulcan, in Evelyn's diary, where she encounters the smith god at the forge, surrounded by the earliest description of automata in Western literature. The automata that populated the interior spaces of the Apennine would have been read in this Homeric key, and Evelyn's description provides a missing puzzle piece to their reconstruction. Although the English text does not specify location, 2 matching lunettes from Guerra's sketches localize some of these in the second room of the Apennine. In these lunettes, a muscular male figure seen clubbing a serpent matches Evelyn's Hercules, whose club yields a shower of water, and the animals in the right-hand lunette may be a visual record of the, quote, hunting of several beasts moving by the force of water. Other animated figures and waterworks described above can be recreated from the limited number of textual and visual sources before their eventual destruction in the early 19th century. Around 7 years after the visit of John Evelyn, Stefano della Bella executed a series of engraved plates that were published in Bernardo Sansoni Scrili's later 1742 Descrizione della Regia Villa, Fontane e Fabbriche di Pratolino. The grand avenue of fountains that impressed Evelyn with the height of their water arches, and the tableau of a Pan automaton playing the pipes while another nymph syrinx, quote, transforms into ascending marsh reeds, are represented in this collection among other views. Evelyn understood the Pratolino automata to be sophisticated works of hydraulic engineering and mathematical magic, as did Schickhardt and Guerra, who left detailed mechanical illustrations earlier in the 17th century. In the tradition pioneered by Giambattista della Porta, these expositions of Pratolino's automata demystified what the earlier era read as magical or occult objects. However, Renaissance magical philosophy itself was no less mechanistic nor primitive. To the contrary, to its makers and elite audience, the Pratolino automata signaled the mastery of an ancient and complex tradition of animating living statues, an endeavor known under the name theurgy, a thread which connected deep antiquity's ritual magic to even the Newtonian ether of the early modern period. The pursuit of harnessing stellar radiation for animation and transformation can be traced to the Platonic tradition, particularly the works of Plato, Plotinus, and Proclus. In the Timaeus, Plato describes a cosmos governed by a divine intellect in which celestial bodies emanate life-giving forces that shape the material world. The Platonist chariot vehicle of the soul had, by the writings of Hierocles of Alexandria in the late 3rd century CE, been wedded to the Aristotelian Stoic soul, composed of fire and air in the Chaldean oracles and Neoplatonist philosophy. The originally Stoic concept of pneuma, conceptualized as breath, soul, air, or a fiery ether, could theoretically then be channeled to a man-made vessel through the manipulation of the energy from stars and planets. Proclus formalized the concept of cosmic sympathy, asserting that all things in the universe are interconnected through a web of divine energies, and Plotinus envisioned the universe as a series of emanations from the divine, with celestial spheres transmitting spiritual essence to the material world. The soul's descent through these spheres imprinted it with astral influences, which could be retraced or harnessed through theurgy, the ritual channeling of divine forces into physical vessels like cult statues. In the Eastern Roman Empire, two major episodes illustrate the intersection of Neoplatonic theurgy and Byzantine history. During Emperor Julian's reign, his initiation into theurgy reportedly involved supernatural phenomena such as eerie voices, fog, animated statues, and, quote, luminous shadows. Centuries later, in 1059 CE, Michael Psellus documented a theurgical ceremony that led to the accusation of Patriarch Michael Cerularius and the monks of Chios. This ritual included chanting, rhythmic movements, the use of hallucinogens, and even the levitation of the prophetess Dositheia, who channeled Christian figures offering trivial messages. More pronounced in the Arabic traditions of talismans and the advancement of Al-Kindi's theory on stellar rays, which percolated into Latin Europe, the esoteric art of telestike, or animatory theurgy, became inseparable from a geometrically precise astrology. Marsilio Ficino's work in Renaissance Florence built upon these ancient traditions, translating and synthesizing Neoplatonic, Hermetic, and astrological knowledge into a framework that legitimized theurgy and celestial influence in a Christianized intellectual context. His translations of the Corpus Hermeticum and Platonic dialogues reinvigorated the idea that astral forces could shape both the soul and the material world. Ficino's works advanced the idea that the human soul, attuned to the divine order, could harness stellar radiation for healing, inspiration, and even the animation of lifeless forms. This philosophical foundation found a receptive audience in the Medici court, where the integration of magic, astrology, and mechanics flourished. The investiture of an object with some divine quality that imbues it with spirit or sense was a central idea to astrological talismans, such as the reputed example made for Catherine de' Medici. Known primarily through engravings, as it does not appear in the public-facing collections of the Louvre, this artifact speaks strongly to the Medici's material engagement with Ficino's astral magic, exemplifying the broader intellectual climate in which Francesco I de' Medici and Bernardo Buontalenti conceived the Automata of the Villa Pratolino. Ficino's advocacy for astrological medicine and spiritual ascent not only shaped Renaissance thought, but also left an indelible mark on the visual culture of the Medici court, a connection extensively explored in art historical scholarship for over half a century. While Ficino's influence on Medici-era painting and sculpture has been the subject of magisterial studies, the Pratolino automata, mechanized wonders that embodied the very synthesis of celestial influence, Neoplatonic philosophy, and human ingenuity, remain largely absent from this discourse. Straddling the boundary between sculpture and engineering, these extraordinary creations were ultimately lost to history, their destruction in the early 19th century reflecting a shift in Medici attitudes towards their own past, as the marvels of Pratolino came to be seen as relics of an extravagant and bygone age. The lost automata of Pratolino, animated through intricate water channeling, would have been read by their creators, but not the later Enlightenment, as embodiments of an astral philosophical tradition that applied Ficino's principles in a mechanical form. Pratolino's waterworks remain a testament not only to the engineering prowess of Francesco I, Bernardo Buontalenti, Gian Bologna, and the numerous other artisans who contributed to this total artwork. Its automata speak distinctly to the Renaissance pursuit of wonder as a pathway to divine knowledge, a pursuit deeply intertwined with the sensory, symbolic, and spiritual power of water. The controlled movement of water within these devices not only facilitated physical animation, but also aligned with the Renaissance belief that natural elements, particularly water, air, and fire, could serve as conduits for celestial forces. This mirrors earlier notions of statue animation in antiquity, where divine presence was thought to be infused into sacred objects through ritual practices. By engineering automata that mimicked life, Francesco I's court demonstrated an effort to bridge cosmic influences with human artistry, positioning the Medici as both patrons of experimental science and heirs to an esoteric legacy that sought to animate the inanimate, whether through celestial radiation, alchemical processes, or hydraulic ingenuity. Fluidity was no mere physical property, but a metaphor for spiritual motion, transformation, and connectivity. Water's circulation through hidden pipes and mechanisms at Pratolino mirrored the circulation of vital forces in both human bodies and the cosmos. The movement of water through Pratolino's systems embodied the flow of divine energy, animating the automata and bridging the material and immaterial worlds in harmony with the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below. Thank you.